There is a phenomenon in the film industry that leads to the creation of films that are bad intentionally. The films exist to parody themselves, or in some questionable cases, to receive some form of governmental compensation so the producers can dodge taxes. Unlike films that are considered so bad it's good, which come into existence from a genuine desire to make something appealing, the anti-film is supposed to lead viewers to expect something, and then subvert those expectations in the worst way.
I'll take a pound of nuts. That's a lot of nuts! That'll be $4, baby! You want fries with that?
As a business venture, the production of these films is extremely risky, provided the company isn't located in Germany. But artistically, there are a lot of opportunities to express something that wouldn't be accepted in conventional film. Now, Uwe Boll isn't a particularly respected artist, but there's no reason this style of media production couldn't be used for artistic purposes. The video game experience is much broader than a film, and generally much longer. While this provides a large number of artistic opportunities that can be used to create a more personal experience, making an anti-game project is much more precarious. Asking a player to engage with something that is deliberately unsatisfying for extended periods of time is often a leap too far. Knowing which facets can be manipulated to not endanger the end-user experience, while also providing that subversion of expectations, is key to creating an anti-video game. While there aren't many developers who have attempted to create an anti-game experience, there certainly have been attempts. Distorting the controls is a particularly risky idea, since the player will have to constantly engage with them throughout their playtime. Creating a method of control that is unenjoyable is far easier than making something that works well. So making something that subverts standard control schemes must be implemented expertly. Games like Manual Samuel or Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy are excellent examples of providing an interesting game experience while making drastic changes to the standards that have developed within video game controls. Other facets that can be altered for a subversive experience include the presentation and the narrative elements, which are both significantly more lenient and receptive to mutations. Cruelty Squad has certainly embraced these opportunities for subversion. In motion, Cruelty Squad is a first-person shooter with an emphasis on providing the player a tremendous number of gameplay options in order to complete its objectives. Each level's objectives are to find the target NPCs, kill them, then find a means to escape. The geography is the real challenge, with levels containing numerous paths to reach the targets that allow the player to find a vantage to snipe from, tunnels to sneak in close, or engage in an all-out assault. There is a plethora of weaponry to choose from, and there are also many upgrades to add to the character to personalize the gameplay experience. Whether the player prefers to be invisible to enemies or to wildly swing from the ceiling, an entire spectrum of tastes are catered to. These upgrades don't come for free though, so the player must religiously collect their victims' organs to sell, as well as a handful of different stocks in order to grow their bank account and purchase the new abilities. Some are hidden in the world too, so there are incentives to search for secrets and find the prizes within. That is, if the visuals aren't too much of a hindrance. I've used the word utilitarian to describe the visual style of a game previously, and while it doesn't necessarily apply to Cruelty Squad, I think it is similar in a mechanical way. The models have minuscule polycounts, and the texture resolutions are similarly tiny. These things created for stylistic purposes as opposed to processor stress reduction. The style is an embracement of the modern chaotic, absurdist nihilism that has been proliferated throughout the current social zeitgeist. Colors are splashed violently across the entire game, with little regard to representing a realistic setting or even adhering to basic color theory. The shapes and proportions of structures often aren't internally consistent, which can cause a sharp, sudden end to any semblance of a style that may have begun to evolve within the previous level. These settings aren't extremely absurd, so the art definitely betrays the game's locations. When listed plainly, a suburban neighborhood or an office block aren't quite what I had envisioned when I became aware of this game. But upon entering those levels, I can confidently say that my expectations were widely avoided. The music is also filled with surprises. In most cases, the music is designed to be repulsive. This could have been achieved by drastically increasing the volume or selecting those frequencies that are uncomfortable to listen to. But consumer soft products instead allowed themselves the ability to make some pieces not only listenable, but fantastic. The music that appears during some intense sequences is genuinely excellent and has no business being as good as it is. There are very few narrative aspects throughout Cruelty Squad, but there are enough hints to infer some kind of series of events. Primarily, events are contextualized by the player's manager, a trucker slug creature who lives on the main menu. Capitalism has proceeded unabated, and the majority of the world's citizens are employed by the same business, the internal conflict department being the player's employer. Each target the player is assigned to are colleagues who have somewhat inconvenienced the very specific intentions of the business's leaders. An astrophysicist had been hired to fly a rocket to Mercury, the board knowing full well that humans can't survive on the planet. Despite this, the physicist had made progress in increasing the chances of human survival on the planet, which were grounds for him to be assassinated. The Mercury mission was designed to be a sacrificial mission, so the prevention of death is against the primary objective. This is only a slight exaggeration of the current consensus of the nihilistic perspective of capitalism's endgame, which really says a lot about society. This perspective has bled into all of the other game's mechanics in a multitude of ways, although some are significantly more absurd than others. In terms of functionality, Cruelty Squad is highly enjoyable to interact with. The character's movement controls are fast, responsive, and highly satisfying. These elements can be bolstered with a number of upgrades too. I especially enjoyed the double jump upgrade to reduce fall damage as well as leave gooey splatter marks everywhere I had been. My first-person shooter skills aren't the greatest, but I managed to click on the enemies' heads easily enough, which definitely gives the feeling of a power fantasy, with the added inclusion of a challenge. There are a surprising quantity of different enemies that range from beat cops to heavily armed members of the titular Cruelty Squad, zombies and flesh rats to much more monstrous creatures, some of which I'm not even sure I have footage of. The kick is also rather entertaining as a means to open doors, but kicking enemies isn't as enjoyable since they don't immediately explode. Each level features a variety of paths to the goal and shouldn't take the player more than a few minutes to finish. The game is also packed with secret weapons, hidden upgrades, and even a handful of secret levels which contain their own treasures. Unfortunately, in order to access the true final level, the player must earn $100,000 in order to purchase a house. Typically, missions pay out a few thousand, and the organ harvesting effort isn't much more profitable. This leaves fishing and the stock market. Fishing is ironically very shallow and not a particularly effective income generator, although some of the fish models are worth seeing. The stock market is the most efficient means to generate enough cash to access the house level, which is something I couldn't really engage with. Gambling on a wiggly line isn't something I find all that fun, and there aren't distinguishable outside factors that impact the stock activity. If completion of a level would cause the stock to rise or fall, then it would make sense, but as it is now, there is very little that can be done to influence the line's behavior. These things are quite easily ignored. As to whether Cruelty Squad is an anti-game, I don't think it is. This game is an awesome experience, and an uncensored manifestation of an absurdist, nihilistic impression of the near future. The content of the world is so bizarre that for the art to hold any semblance to reality would be inappropriate. If a contractor uses all of the funding to buy houses and plastic collectibles, and the appropriate response to that is to murder them, then this game shouldn't be presented in any other way. The content almost totally avoids video games as a subject, and nothing on screen ever tries to make the player conscious that they're playing a game. It isn't an anti-game, it's just a genuinely great experience. To recommend Cruelty Squad isn't as simple as many other games I've played. There is a fairly aggressive barrier to entry that is clear to many within the game's Steam discussion forums. For those who enjoy becoming immersed in a video game world, exploring the details, uncovering the narrative, and engaging with a few different gameplay types, there is very little for you here. Immersion and narrative aren't aspects the game was ever trying to achieve within, and the art style has left very few opportunities for interesting detail. But if being able to play in any way you like, an engaging challenge, a pile of content, and unbelievably satisfying gameplay are things you value highly in a game, then Cruelty Squad is an excellent use of your time. I'll be back to buy that house one day. But for now, I think I'll take that trip to the mountains.